Do you have any evidence to present?
This is not my case, but I do have the Cash App in question here. That was actually
Judge,
denied.
this is improper.
I think you gotta wait till your trial.
You know what I'm saying? That's not my client, Mr. McNaughton. But Mr. McNaughton is the one who's in jail. He's 16 years old. He's been there for 3 weeks. I don't know how the DA, the officer, everybody can be so happy.
That's correct, Judge. You did. And Attorney Jerome was present when you indicated that it would be placed on Wednesday's calendar because of the process. The procedure is that there should be a pickup order. The juvenile will be brought to the sheriff's office.
Please,
everybody's
can you please?
Everybody's talking at the same time. All right.
And Ms. Freeman thought that it was her position to jump in and interrupt.
You jumped in and interrupted a hearing that you weren't involved in. So there's been a whole lot of interrupting. Would everyone just settle down for a second?
Hold on to your peaches, folks. We're heading down to Georgia. Shout out to Georgia Peach. Hope you're doing well. So anyway, this is a really interesting case that I came across yesterday. This young man down here is being implicated in kind of stealing something. It's really, really hard to figure this one out. And it seems like his lawyer is big mad about it. You're going to see him kind of towards the end of the video, but it's actually a fascinating case. So I'm just going to let it play for you. Let me know down below what you think. I want to know, if you were on a jury right now, would you be convicting this guy based on what you've got, or would you be letting him go? I'm still undecided, so I'll wait to hear what you have to say down below.
Okay, we are back streaming live on YouTube. I'm calling the state of Georgia versus Westland Garcia. Warrant number 2023WA13559. There at the jail, if you're a Westland Garcia, just wave at me to confirm that's you. Okay, Mr. Garcia, can you hear me? Okay, can you wave at me? Just confirm you're Westland Garcia. Okay, thank you, sir. You are charged with armed robbery. Representing the state is Ms. Freeman, and representing Mr. Garcia is Ms. Porter. And Ms. Freeman, you can call your witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. Officer Porter, would you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear and affirm that the testimony about provided in the matter of the state of Georgia versus Westland Garcia will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. You can lower your hand. Please tell us your name and how you're employed.
I'm going to be Officer Porter, badge number 207. I'm employed with the city of Riverdale by Riverdale PD.
How long have you been with the Riverdale Police Department?
It'll be going on 2 years.
Were you working with the Riverdale Police Department on August 5th of 2023?
Yes, ma'am.
On that particular day, were you dispatched to 558 Shadow Moon Drive in Riverdale, Georgia for a theft or an armed robbery call?
Yes, ma'am.
What exactly is at that location?
It's going to be a residential home, ma'am.
Was this the residence of Eric Bodie or Body?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that the alleged victim in this case?
Yes, ma'am.
When you arrived at Mr. Body's address, what did Mr. Body tell you that happened?
Okay, so I was dispatched to 558 Shadowmore Drive in Riverdale at approximately 1:30 in the afternoon. Once arriving on scene, I spoke with the complainant, Mr. Body. Mr. Body stated that he tried to sell an ATV four-wheeler, blue in color, to the defendant, Mr. Garcia, and another juvenile. At that time, Mr. Body said they agreed to pay him $300 for the said ATV. He said they went to pay the transaction through Cash App, at which time that transaction declined and he looked down at his phone. Mr. Body then stated, as he looked back up, Mr. Garcia had a black and silver handgun pointed at him, while his co-defendant loaded it into the back of his pickup truck, and they told him not to move and pulled off with his four-wheeler.
Was Mr. Body able to give you a description of the individuals?
Yes, ma'am. So Mr. Body was able to give us a description of both males. He said it was the Hispanic male that was in possession of the firearm pointed at him, while the black male loaded onto the back of the pickup truck. He was also able to give us a description of the pickup truck, which they loaded it into. at which time we were able, myself and Officer Hall, were able to use our devices to get onto the flock camera system and track that vehicle's direction of travel, at which time I was able to get the license plate off the vehicle, get the registered owner's name, which would be Mr. Garcia's father. And I spoke to Mr. Garcia on the phone, who advised that four-wheeler was in his son's possession, and he would bring his son plus the other defendant back to the location with the ATV.
Is that what happened, Officer Porter?
Yes, ma'am.
How long was it before it was returned?
We were able to get him to return in approximately 40 minutes, 30 to 40 minutes.
Were you able to locate the firearm that Mr. Garcia used?
No, ma'am.
Did Mr. Garcia provide any statements about what happened?
Yes, ma'am. In return, Mr. Garcia stated that they came to purchase the four-wheeler, but his story was flipped to where he said Mr. Body pulled out a firearm on them and they just pulled off because they were scared.
Were there any other witnesses there that you
No,
were
ma'am.
able to talk to?
No, ma'am.
Was there any type of video surveillance or footage that you were able to review?
No, ma'am. We did knock on the doors because we seen some of the neighbors had ring door footage there, but none of the camera angles were pointed at the direction of 558 Shadowmore.
The juvenile who was present, was that Mr. McNaughton?
Yes, ma'am.
Did he provide a statement about what happened?
Yes, ma'am. At that time, he also stated that Mr. Body pulled out a firearm on them, and that's why they pulled off. He also stated that he arranged to make the Cash App payment, and then the payment did not go through, and he was scared that Mr. Body was going to know where he was, so he changed his Cash App name on the app.
When Mr. Garcia provided, I guess, his story about what happened, was he able to explain why he had Mr. Body's ATV?
No, ma'am.
So we're clear, officer, Mr. Body did not give Mr. Garcia or the juvenile permission to take his ATV.
That is correct.
Did all of this happen in Clayton County?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
All right, Ms. Porter.
Thank you, Your Honor. Officer Porter, couple of quick questions. Mr. McNaughton is a juvenile, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
I believe he's 16 years old. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Would you say that he's a relatively small young man?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Oh, Ms. Porter, you're you.
So
Okay, good.
the 200 ATV and onto the bed of the truck.
I'm sorry, you cut out for a minute. Can you repeat the question?
I'm sorry. So Mr. Body's story is that Mr. McNaughton, who you agree is a relatively small young man, picked up a ATV and put it onto the bed of a truck by himself.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Did you see the ATV?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Would it be fair to say that the ATV probably weighs 200-300 pounds?
I can't make that assumption, ma'am.
Okay. Do you know how much an ATV weighs?
No, ma'am.
Have you ever tried to pick up an ATV?
Yes,
Objection, Judge. It's not relevant.
Your Honor, it's relevant because they're saying that he stole it. And the way that they stole it is that he picked it up by himself and placed it onto the bed of a truck. So I'm trying to determine if a young man, small in stature, could in fact have picked up an ATV off the ground by himself.
Okay.
Not at this stage. Oh.
I think
I'm
the
sorry.
officer. I think the officer has testified he doesn't know how much it would weigh. So so you can kind of move on that.
Thank you, Your Honor. You never found a gun on either of the defendants, is that correct?
No, ma'am,
Okay.
because they already had fled the.
Okay. Did you ever ask, after speaking with both of the defendants whose story appears to have been the same, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And their story is that they did not have a gun, but Mr. Body in fact had a gun, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you ever ask Mr. Body if he in fact had a firearm?
Yes, ma'am.
And did he have a firearm?
No, he stated he did not, ma'am.
Okay. Did you in fact see the declined Cash App transaction?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so it is clear that the kids did in fact attempt to Cash App Mr. Body, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Did you ever ask Mr. Body if his Cash App was flagged?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
Yeah. So from my experience of the decline transaction that went through, it's common for people to send a transaction but leave their phone on airplane mode so the payment does not go through.
Okay. But you don't know that that's what happened in this case, correct?
No, ma'am.
Okay. And Mr. Body says that he contacted Mr. Garcia's father, is that correct?
No, ma'am.
You contacted Mr. Garcia's father?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and you asked Mr. Garcia to come back, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And they did in fact come back, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so they weren't
after Mr. Garcia had to make his son come back.
Were you there during that conversation?
No, ma'am. I was on the phone with him.
Okay, so Mr. Garcia brought his son back, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and you said he had to make his son come back, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Is it possible his son was scared because Mr. Body had pulled a gun on
That
him?
would object that speculation.
Sustained.
Did Mr. Body ever say that he followed the boys at all after they left?
Yes, ma'am. He said when they pulled off in the truck after they got halfway down the block, he ran after the truck to see in which direction they were traveling.
Okay, and then what did he do after that?
He came back to his residence and called 911.
Okay. So it's his story that after these young men pulled a gun on him, he then ran after their truck.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Was there ever a conversation about the boys just paying Mr. Garcia, I'm sorry, Mr. Body, once the father brought him back?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Did Mr. Garcia ever indicate that it was his intention to steal this ATV?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Did he indicate that it was his intention to purchase the ATV?
Yes, ma'am.
And he told you, correct me if I'm wrong, that the Cash App failed and then Mr. Body put a gun on them, so they left. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. That's all I have, Your Honor.
Okay, Ms. Freeman, any follow-ups?
No, Your Honor. The state rests.
Okay, thank you.
Your
Ms.
Honor.
Porter, do you have any evidence
Your
to
Honor,
present?
this is not my case, but I do have the Cash App in question here. That was actually
Judge,
denied.
this is improper.
I think you gotta wait till your trial.
Thank you,
Your Honor,
Judge.
can I ask?
I said, hang on, everybody, hang on. So, Mr. Jerome, let me address this real quick. I think you're essentially sitting in the gallery right now, so I don't think it's proper for you to come in. I think you're gonna have to wait till your rescheduled date for your client.
Judge,
So,
can I have a brief moment? I believe Mr. Jerome may have some evidence that's pertinent to my case. If I can have just a quick second, I can grab it from him and be prepared to introduce the evidence myself.
Judge, I'm going to object to that. I asked that we reset both defendants on the same day. Attorney Porter was the one who objected to that and wanted to proceed today. And because Attorney Jerome improperly inserted himself into this hearing, now Attorney Porter wants a moment to talk to Attorney Jerome. I object to all of that because Attorney Porter had the opportunity to wait and do this hearing at a later date, and she chose not to.
Your Honor, I understand that it's improper for Attorney Jerome to insert himself into the case.
Well,
I don't
so
think it's
hold
improper.
on. Let's start there. So Attorney Jerome, okay, turn the camera off. All right, now Ms. Porter, go ahead.
I don't believe it's improper for the defense to ask for a brief moment to gather some evidence.
How are you going to talk to him?
I'm going to call him very briefly.
All right, we'll take 3 minutes, okay?
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay.
And judges, my objection is noted for the record.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
All right, everybody back.
Yes, Your Honor.
Ms. Freeman, hang on just a second. I don't think Ms. Freeman's back yet. Okay, Ms. Freeman's back. Okay, Ms. Porter.
Yes, I'm here. I'm sorry.
Your Honor, I'd actually like to ask Mr. Garcia's father, Alexis Garcia, to log into the Zoom. I believe he's watching it from YouTube right now.
Judge, that is going to be a problem. And my objection is if Attorney Porter has just admitted that the witness has been watching the hearing via YouTube, that certainly goes against any kind of separation of witnesses. She did not announce any witnesses in the beginning. When Attorney Jerome had announced his witnesses, they were placed in the waiting room. But she has just admitted that this witness has been watching it via YouTube.
Okay. I asked at the beginning whether you were going to be presenting witnesses for that reason. And so I'm not going to allow him to testify today. Do you have any witnesses who, I asked you earlier if you were going to have any witnesses and you didn't have any at the time. So Ms. Porter, I think we're ready for closing arguments at this point.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Ms. Freeman, closing.
The state waives opening.
All right, Ms. Porter.
Your Honor, this is not a situation of an armed robbery. This is a situation where two young men went to purchase a ATV from Mr. Body. They sent a Cash App. The Cash App actually declined because Mr. Body's Cash App was flagged.
Attorney Porter is trying to introduce something into her closing argument that was not testified to.
Your Honor, additionally, I withdraw that portion, Your Honor.
I didn't catch actually what the statement was, the end, so it really doesn't matter anyway. So go ahead, Ms. Porter.
So the Cash App was bounced back. The state is attempting to claim that a small statured young man picked up a four-wheel ATV on his own, high enough to place it onto the bed of a truck. I find that to be incredulous and hard to believe. What actually happened, Your Honor, based off of what the officer testified, what both of the young men testified, and this is a situation where you have two young men saying the exact same thing versus one person who's saying something else. These young men went to purchase an ATV from Mr. Body. They sent him a Cash App. They both together loaded the ATV onto the back of the truck while Mr. Body was there. The Cash App then declined. Mr. Body then pulled a weapon.
I'm going to object again. Attorney Porter, in her closing argument, is trying to introduce statements that weren't testified to.
Ms. Freeman, I think everything she just said was exactly what the detective said that the defendants said. So I don't see any problem with what she just said. Oh. I'd like to let her finish closing.
Okay.
The young men then left. At some point in time, Mr. Body followed them and pulled a weapon on them, and they fled from the scene because they were afraid. It's my understanding, based off of what the officer said, and based off of just simple 1+1, that once the Cash App failed, Mr. Body pulled a gun on the kids left. When the officers called and asked for them to come back, they came back. Mr. Body got his ATV back. There was no conversation about whether or not they could just make the additional payment. At most, Your Honor, at the very most, this is a theft by taking situation. This is not an armed robbery situation. There was no gun found. Neither of the boys testified, or the officer testified that neither of the boys said that they had a gun. Both of the young men said that Mr. Body is actually the person who had a gun. And I don't believe that it's disputed that there was in fact a cash app sent. I don't believe it's disputed that the young men actually left. Whether or not who had the gun, I think maybe the only question here. But I think that in a situation where you have two people saying we did not have a gun, the other person did, the weight of evidence, I believe, Your Honor, should tend to fall towards the two people as opposed to this one victim who is attempting to make this be an entirely larger situation. And to be totally honest, the victim at this point is not out of anything because they brought it back. All the officer had to do was call and ask, and they came back to the scene. I think that the charges should be dismissed in its entirety. If the court doesn't find that the charges should be dismissed, I would ask the court to reduce the charges to a theft by taking, because I do understand that the boys did leave and the cash app did in fact bounce back. But I don't believe an armed robbery is appropriate here. There honestly is no evidence that there was ever a weapon held by this defendant. So I would ask the court to dismiss it in its entirety, and if not, to reduce to a theft by taking.
Okay, Ms. Freeman.
Thank you, Judge. We're asking that the charge of armed robbery is bound over to Superior Court. We heard the testimony from Officer Porter when he spoke to the victim in this case, Mr. Body. He indicated that Mr. Garcia held the gun on him while the other individual grabbed the ATV. Neither of the individuals were able to explain if Mr. Body was the one who pointed the gun, how in the world did they come to take his ATV? They didn't have his permission to take it. Officer Porter contacted the defendant's father, Mr. Garcia, and after speaking with him, he stated that he would make his son bring the ATV back. Yes, it was returned, but that does not negate the fact that there was an armed robbery. There was a gun used. These two individuals took the ATV, and we're asking that the one charge of armed robbery is bound over to Superior Court.
Okay, thank you. Based on the evidence and testimony presented, I do find probable cause to bind over the charge of armed robbery to Superior Court. I will issue that order today. So thank you, everyone, and everyone here for the Garcia hearing can be excused.
Your Honor, are you able to hear us on a bond issue?
No.
It has to be filed in Superior Court.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. And Judge, and I guess may Officer Porter be excused until next Wednesday, the 6th?
Yes. Yes, thank you,
All right.
officer.
Your Honor.
Thank you.
Your Honor, excuse me, before you release Officer Porter, I did not hear the court essentially, I don't know how come the court would continue my case without my presence. I was actually on the phone with the RYDC, and they said that they do have a setup for Zoom. They usually use it for first appearance, but they can use it for this preliminary hearing. So we are going to have my client's preliminary hearing. He's a 16-year-old kid that didn't do anything wrong. And
I postponed this in our conversation earlier.
That's correct, Judge. You did. And Attorney Jerome was present when you indicated that it would be placed on Wednesday's calendar because of the process. The procedure is that there should be a pickup order, and the juvenile will be brought to the sheriff's office.
Everybody's
Can you please?
Everybody's talking at the same time. All right.
And Ms. Freeman thought that it was her position to jump in and interrupt.
You jumped in and interrupted a hearing that you weren't involved in. So there's been a whole lot of interrupting. Would everyone just settle down for a second? Mr. Jerome, this was addressed earlier. You were on. We talked about how are we going to handle this because there was no production order. That is the process here. And we said we're going to postpone your hearing. We then just moved on to this hearing that we just held and decided we're going to go ahead and move forward with that because that attorney had a leave of absence for the date next week that when we rescheduled yours. You've now jumped back in and you've told me, well, I wasn't there. You were there when we talked about this. So I'm not quite understanding what's going on, but I'm going to let you speak. Go ahead.
All right. I understand that the officer the last that I heard, the officer was checking to see if there was a production order put in, which I had already known that there was not. I actually was at the YDC yesterday and I spoke to them and everything else. And had I known, I would have handled this yesterday. But nonetheless, Your Honor, this is not the issue of Mr. McNaughton. You know what I mean? He's a 16-year-old kid. He's, you know what I'm saying? Essentially, he turned himself in. He came back to the scene. He called 911. You know what I'm saying? He did all this. This is not somebody that was running or acting like any kind of criminal at all. The person that is the criminal, the person who actually has cases here in Clinton County is Mr. Body. Mr. Body is the one who makes false police reports. Mr. Body is the one who has trespassing charges in Clinton County.
There's really
a theft by taking. You know what I'm saying? That's not my client, Mr. McNaughton. But Mr. McNaughton is the one who's in jail. He's 16 years old. He's been there for 3 weeks. I don't know how the DA, the officer, everybody can be so happy just letting this kid sit in jail, miss school and all this, and he didn't do anything wrong. Did they even look into Mr. Body and what kind of person he is?
Is Sergeant Barton in the front?
all right. You ready for me?
Officer Porter, make sure
All
you
right,
stay
here's
muted,
what-
please.
Here's
Stay
what we're
muted, Officer
doing.
Porter.
Again, that case is reset. Your client's case is reset. I believe it's September the 6th. I think it's a week from now. These are all these issues that you are bringing up are issues you can bring up in that hearing. But for today's business, it's reset. That takes care of it. And you can be excused, Mr. Jerome.
All right. Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, thanks.
Well, there we have it, lads and lassies. I just watched it again as I was editing this together, and I'm still none the wiser as to what exactly happened. What I do know is if you are looking for a lawyer to fight your corner, that guy is the guy to do it. Now, if you like watching videos with angry lawyers, stay tuned to the end of this video. You'll see it pop up on the screen here. There's another one. It's absolutely awesome. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you so much for joining me, and we'll catch you in the next one. Sláinte.